Tomorrow, April 1st, marks the beginning of Child Abuse Prevention Month. It's a time for communities to build caring connections, supportive environments, and positive experiences for all children. We all know child abuse is a problem and has gotten worse during the pandemic. But what happens if a child is mistakenly identified as a victim? Families can be torn apart in many instances. NBC News partnered with the Houston Chronicle investigating parents being separated from their children based on inaccurate claims of abuse. Joining us now to talk about this is NBC News investigative reporter Mike Hixenbaugh. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us, what is actually happening in these cases that is splitting these families apart?
Thanks for having me. The cases that we're talking about and that we reported on are really cases where children very small children, babies and toddlers, children too young to speak for themselves. When those children come to hospitals with serious injuries, there's a justifiable concern and effort to try to make sure that the story that the parents are telling matches the child's injuries. And so there's a type of physician, child abuse pediatricians, whose job is to make those assessments. And if a parent says, I dropped my baby and he hit his head in this way, they look to see if the injury matches that story. And if it doesn't, then the case will be referred to Child Protective Services. But what we found in our reporting is, as with any medical diagnosis, there's room for mistakes. And so there have been cases where children were removed from parents based on a medical report that later turned out to not be the complete story.
All right, we know Texas lawmakers now are looking at changes to protect families who are wrongly accused of child abuse. How much support for this legislation is there in the Capitol?
Yeah, that's right. There's a whole raft of bills working their way through the legislature with the goal of making sure CPS still has the tools to protect children from harm, while also creating some checks and balances in the system to prevent unnecessary removals of children. And so one of the bills that we wrote about is an effort to give parents an opportunity to request a second medical opinion before the child is removed, and just to make sure that the information that CPS is working with is the best information possible. And it seems like there's a lot of momentum in this legislative session with support from both Republicans and Democrats to finding ways to strike a balance to protect kids while also keeping families together when it's possible.
All right, and again, the report is in conjunction with the Houston Chronicle. NBC News investigative reporter Mike Hixenbaugh. Mike, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.